Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeremiah Dooley, and I'm one of the principal architects here at NetApp SolidFire, working out of the office of the CTO. Thanks for joining us this morning. And what we're going to talk about today is something that is an extension of a long-time interest and a long-time focus of the SolidFire product and the SolidFire team. Today, we're specifically going to talk about software as a service and how SolidFire allows software as a service customers to get a handle on the operational battle that goes on when trying to build storage that sits behind a SaaS platform. As we go through here, if you have any questions, please go ahead and throw them in the chat that should be down in the bottom left-hand corner of your conference screen. And as we go through, we'll try to take breaks periodically, see what questions are in there, and be able to address them. Let's go ahead and get started. When we look at the agenda today, we'll start with a brief market overview of where SolidFire sits and the type of customers that we've been talking to, specifically on the service provider and the customers who are most interested in spending capital on infrastructure in order to generate revenue. We'll talk about the Fueled by SolidFire program and some of the history of success that we've had there, and then we'll start to look at the software as a service market in general and where we see that going, and really the market size there and the number of customers that are driving their software products in that way are really increasing and really starting to drive a bunch of attention, not just from SolidFire, but from storage vendors in general. We'll finish up with an introduction to SolidFire and some of the technical details in the background that are facilitating the things that we can do for both service providers and SaaS providers. And then we'll end up looking at the reasons that SolidFire from a software standpoint ends up being a great fit for companies that are looking to build a platform that's flexible and dynamic enough to be able to handle whatever software and whatever amount of customers gets thrown at it. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. When we talk about SolidFire, especially when we talk about SolidFire in the context of service providers, we're pretty comfortable standing up and saying that we've become the de facto standard for block storage inside service providers worldwide. As a company, SolidFire was founded specifically for this reason. The gap analysis that was done that created the SolidFire product specifically targeted service providers, multi-tenancy, and the need to both consolidate block storage platforms down for operational simplicity, but also the ability to operate and orchestrate and automate those as much as humanly possible. So the things that we've put in place from a product standpoint, combined with the focus that we've had around these type of customers, have really put us in the position of being the standard for both infrastructure as a service companies, hosting providers, and increasingly software as a service companies as well. When we look at it from a business standpoint, it's pretty obvious to see why it is that we would focus on the service provider market. This is a place where, as the on-premises market for hardware continues to slide, as we continue to see more cloud providers playing here, the spend and the focus on being able to drive lots of different types of service provider business have simply continued to increase. So the infrastructure as a service market being where we started, but then quickly as we moved into the hosting market, because we saw that simply providing infrastructure as a service wasn't changing the consumption model of what customers were looking for. It was simply changing who they paid for the hardware that they were using. When we moved into a managed hosting environment, we get much more impact on the customers, because we're fundamentally changing how they look at infrastructure, how they look at the operational side of managing that infrastructure, and how they look at scaling it. So this transition from infrastructure as a service to managed hosting has been far and away the largest part of the SolidFire business, and has been one of the most dynamic markets that we've played in to this point. In order to facilitate this, and in order to make sure that we were aligning both the product and the go-to-market of the product as tightly as we could with those service providers, we built an entire program called Fueled by SolidFire specifically for them. And the goal here was to take hosting services, software as a service companies, infrastructure as a service companies, and help educate them as to the market and what sort of possibilities there are when you look at the architecture and the infrastructure model that SolidFire provides, and how we can help make their business move faster, how we can help them address new markets, how we can help them target different types of products inside those markets. The Fueled by SolidFire program had a few real tangible benefits for the customers. Being able to reduce the amount of time that it takes to productize new offerings, being able to drive improved systems utilization so that you're actually using the hardware that you paid for, being able to develop new marketing opportunities, new ways to go to market, new audiences to talk to, being able to improve the effectiveness of the staff, being able to allow the things that the customers were asking for to become reality easier, being able to improve the targeting of the account executives. How do we sell things? How do we position them in the market? And then finally, being able to help really reduce the churn of that. We know that whether it's infrastructure as a service, managed hosting, or software as a service companies, the vast majority of the revenue there gets generated by making sure that current customers stay customers, and that we have the ability to introduce new products and introduce new technologies and continue to expand the portfolio of offerings that we can sell without having to go back and re-earn the business of customers who've left for whatever reason. And those business outcomes become pretty amazing. This is one of the reasons why the service provider environment, anyone who's taking invested capital and turning it into recurring revenue, really likes both the Fueled by SolidFire program but also the SolidFire architecture. Being able to monetize storage in lots of different ways and monetize the services that sit on top of it, including software as a service and platform as a service offerings, really being able to streamline the operations. And that's not just the management of the storage itself, but that's the relationship between the storage and the development teams that are producing the products that sit on top of that. Turning the storage into a programmatic, code-driven infrastructure is something that ends up being a fantastic benefit for customers who've standardized on this platform. We want to win more customer applications, and the corollary on the software as a service side is we want to be able to host more applications. And then overall, we really want to reduce the risk of that. We don't want customers to get 3 years down the road and have forklift upgrades or have technology shifts end up catching them short. We don't want them to spend a bunch of capital and put a service offering on the floor that doesn't end up matching what it is that their customers are looking for. And we want to be able to integrate as deeply as we can into the platforms that our customers are choosing so that the investment that they make is in the platform and is in managing and expanding the platform and not in the infrastructure pieces that are sitting over it, sitting underneath it. And this has become not just a US-based success story, but a global success story. Some of the largest service providers, telcos, hosting providers, SaaS providers on the planet have been happy with both the Fueled by SolidFire program as well as the SolidFire architecture, and we continue to expand that out as we go. This portfolio, I think, is one of the most valuable parts of the work that we get to do with service providers. That service providers get to take advantage of it, that software as a service providers get to see what the possibilities are and how we would deliver that, and that all of this resource becomes available by proxy through the Fueled by SolidFire program is really one of the benefits that we try to drive the most there. Now, the interesting thing is that we've been talking about the infrastructure as a service and the hosted markets, and when we look at software as a service, the market opportunity there dwarfs both of them. Right? The growth here in the software as a service market comes as companies get more comfortable with the idea of either a web-based or a cloud-based application stack, but also as the software as a service providers start to figure out how to build offerings and how to build applications that meet the performance and availability requirements that those customers have. There's always been the idea that once we move it out of our data center, there's going to be a change in the availability. What we're finally starting to see is that change in performance and availability is trending up and not down. We're not asking customers to make compromises anymore as they move from an on-premises software environment to a cloud-based or software as a service-based environment. The software as a service market size, if you've looked at any of the analyst reports, is a little bit all over the place. We've seen it as low as about 40 billion. I've seen it as high as 150 billion. Really, it depends a lot on what your definition is of software as a service. Generally, when we look across them, people agree that SaaS market in 2015 was around $50 billion, with about a doubling of that between 2015 and 2019. Right? I mean, so when we look at going from a $50 billion market to a $100 billion market, and when we generally see our software as a service customers are investing about a third of that spend in the infrastructure and in the storage that sits underneath it, there's a huge opportunity there for us as a company, but there's also a huge opportunity for us to make that process and make that infrastructure that the software as a service companies are looking to build a lot better. Regionally, North America accounts for about 50%, a little more than 50% of the SaaS sales. EMEA is the second largest market, and largely that's being driven by the UK, France, and Ireland. And then APJ is the smallest opportunity, but the fastest growth. We've seen that APJ generally has a lot of focus on telcos being infrastructure as a service and hosting providers. And as that market matures, they're quickly starting that move into the software as a service environment, so that it is the smallest opportunity today, but it's certainly the fastest growing and the most dynamic of them. When we look at how that's spread out, that total market segment there between software as a service, which is the largest of them and continues to gain disproportionately more share going forward, the infrastructure as a service, which is still growing, but not at the same pace, and then the platform as a service, which is something that we think is gaining increased viability, especially as the type of applications that are being deployed are looking much more cloud native than some of the things that are out there today. We can see, that global SaaS market growth is really why both the SaaS customers as well as hardware vendors like NetApp and SolidFire are investing in it. In 2015, Salesforce was obviously the #1 SaaS provider by themselves. They accounted for almost 11% of that market. Microsoft comes in at #2 with all of the Microsoft software as a service offerings combined there. But this is a place where whatever that growth is being driven by, whether it's social, whether it's search, whether it's you being more effective at marketing that, there's an awful lot of opportunity here, especially for companies who've traditionally distributed software through a retail model, to really transform how it is that they're both delivering that software and how they're recognizing the revenue off of it. When we look at that specifically, the comparison between software as a service growth and traditional software growth, the projection there is that it's 5x delta between the two of them. Right, the cloud software side of things, and here we're looking at cloud applications, we're looking at cloud-based system infrastructure software, and then we're looking at the cloud-based platform as a service. Again, we start to see not sequential growth here, not linear growth, but exponential growth as those markets mature and as the customers get more comfortable with those offerings. So for the focus that we're putting on here, for when SolidFire talks about software as a service, what we're specifically talking about here is the green section. Right? These are the applications that could be delivered in a retail or could be delivered in an on-premises manner, that are instead being delivered through a cloud-based delivery system, that are being delivered as a service. So that focus of ours is shifting or allowing for both the infrastructure as a service and hosting markets, but then also focusing as much, if not more, on the software as a service market is really supported by and driven by the numbers that we're seeing from the industry. And so what are we trying to do here? If we're going to take that 5x number as a given, there are really two parts of this. There are two value propositions here that SolidFire wants to be the best on the planet at. And the first of those is going to be the production applications, right? Being able to deliver the performance and availability that customers want, being able to deliver a quality user experience, being able to leverage both the scale and QoS functionality of the SolidFire platform effectively. And then most importantly on the production application side, keeping the cost in line with the revenue, allowing there to be as small a stair step as possible between recognizing revenue and then having to spend capital on additional capacity so that we can drive more revenue. Keeping that in line is something that the SolidFire architecture allows for uniquely among enterprise all-flash performance products. So being able to really drive value around the performance applications is the first part of that value proposition. The second is that we have to recognize and acknowledge that there's a developer team or teams that are furiously updating code and updating platforms in order to be able to drive new functionality and features out to users, provide better performance and availability, and even create entirely new products that they're releasing. And our responsibility here is to help them reduce the risk of that process, to help them reduce the overhead, to simplify that life cycle as much as we possibly can. When we do that, we really help enhance the developer productivity. We don't ever want developers waiting on infrastructure. We don't ever want developers, frankly, even thinking about infrastructure. We want them to have a platform that scales as they need it, that provides a safe and consolidated and isolated place for them to be able to test code before it gets promoted into production. And we want them to be able to do that natively through the tools that they're using upstream. So whether that's code directly, whether that's OpenStack, whether that's containers, whether that's CloudStack, whether that's VMware, we want the developers and the platform and infrastructure people that are working with those developers to have as seamless a platform as possible to be able to work on. So as we go through this, we really want to focus on everything that we talk about and all of the different pieces that we look at. Everything is aligned to being the best that we can possibly be with the product that we have for these two value propositions. So I think we're going to take a break right there real quick, and we'll check chat and see if there's anything in there. Let's see. Nope, it looks like we're good. Okay, excellent. Again, if you have any questions or if there's anything that you need clarification on, or if you want a follow-up about any of these specific things offline and don't want to ask the question in chat, please feel free to go ahead and tag one of the presenters with your email address, and we'll certainly follow up with you. So now that we've talked about the value proposition that we're going to be driving, let's look at how we want to tie this back to the technical features of the platform. So as with any service provider product, right, whatever segment it is that it happens to be in, there's a series of business value that we have to be able to provide. Because the best technology that's the most easily consumable, most programmatic, easily operated thing in the world isn't going to be effective inside a service provider environment if it can't directly benefit the business that we're trying to drive. So the four key business benefits we're looking to drive here are reducing that complexity and time to value, giving software as a service providers the ability to unlock new markets and provide differentiated offerings because of the value of the platform, to improve that customer experience, reduce churn, increase satisfaction, and then blend that storage spend with the revenue. And this is very much focused on the people who are building the business case around that software as a service platform. On the developer side, right, when we talk about the actual SaaS application management side of things, there's some correlated but specific benefits that we want to provide there. While we're trying to reduce complexity on the business side, we really want to be able to minimize the amount of time between commit and customer. We want to be able to minimize the amount of time that it takes to get new code, updated code, tested code into the environment. When we talk about unlocking new markets on the business benefit, for the developers, we really want to give them the ability to be the disruption, rather than having them hamstrung by an infrastructure that doesn't allow them to change or adapt as fast as possible. We want to give them a blank canvas that allows them to create as amazing software as they possibly want to, and give them the opportunity to be out front and be the disruptor in those markets rather than the followers. We really want, on both the code deployment, the code management, as well as on the business side, we want to be able to exceed customer expectations all the way around. We know that one of the propositions, the biggest value propositions for customers on the SaaS side, is that there is no such thing as an upgrade. There is no such thing as a change control window, right? We have the ability to provide a software service that can be continually maintained, updated, new features added, dynamically and live in an environment. And being able to exceed customer expectations, being able to minimize downtime, being able to minimize performance impact is something that's really important to us. And then finally, whereas the business is really worried about managing storage spend with revenue, for the developers, we just want them to not think about it at all. Develop as much code as you want, build as many test dev copies as you want, run as many regression tests as you want at whatever scale you want. We promise there's always going to be more storage to be able to handle that on the back end. And then technically, when we look at what the storage array and what the infrastructure does really well, what the SolidFire architecture enables, there are things that we want to be able to bring out as technical advantages to line up underneath these. Right? We want to reduce complexity and time to value because we want to give you the ability to develop in parallel protected and isolated environments on the same array. We want to be able to integrate in with existing orchestration suites and simplify the solution automation side of things. So this is very much not a, here are the marketing buzzwords that we want to be able to capture. This is from a bottom up. Here's the architecture and what we're really, really good at, and how do we turn that into value for both the developers who are working with the code as well as the business teams who are working with the dollars and cents and trying to figure out how to run a viable business here. At the end of the day, what we want to do, using these technical advantages, driving benefits into both the business and the SaaS, is just get out of the way. We want this to be the most boring, most transparent storage infrastructure that's ever sat underneath a service offering, because the goal here is to let you code on, and we'll take care of all the plumbing underneath. The good news here is that this isn't something that we're unfamiliar with. Right? What we've got up on the screen there now are 4 spectacular customer examples of software as a service companies, and specifically the dramatic differences that they saw in their environments as they moved from a traditional storage environment or from a legacy platform environment into a place where they could really focus on the software products they were delivering and the customers that they were taking care of. HedServe, FICO, Ultimate Software, and Indicia all have larger, kind of more extended customer case study examples that are available on the SolidFire website. Please feel free to go out and download those. It'll not only talk about, from a SaaS perspective, what was valuable to them and what they implemented, but it'll also go into what the actual solution was, what the platform these companies are using to be able to deliver their software products are, how that, which pieces of the SolidFire architecture and service and product set were most valuable to them. So please, if you get a chance, go out and do that. But the key quotes here, I think, are the big differentiators. Right? We wanted to be able to accelerate production in QA environments. We wanted to be able to develop and deliver high-quality applications faster, and SolidFire let us do that. We wanted to be able to reach into markets that we couldn't before. SolidFire let us do that. We wanted to be able to deliver lots of applications to lots of customers. We wanted to be able to get rid of performance and stability challenges. Right? We wanted our customer experience to get back to what they wanted, not what they'd come to expect as we worked through infrastructure issues. And then finally, the consistency and the response times are where we make our money, right? And being able to segregate applications on it, being able to not think about where those are being placed or what tier of storage those are going on or what capabilities I have from what storage platform it is that I'm supporting underneath my infrastructure is something that really allows these 4 companies, but then many, many more like them, to focus on the core of their business. And like it or not, the core business of a software as a service company isn't and never should be the infrastructure. And the faster we can get out of the way and let your success in developing applications shine, the better it is for all of us. So if we've looked at the service provider markets and we've looked at the kind of the software as a service focus and what it is that we're doing with customers there, then the question becomes, under the hood, what makes the SolidFire platform such a good fit for these environments? There are 4 kind of core tenets of how SolidFire was born that really factor into this. The first was, this was never a legacy storage product. This was not something that started in the mid-market and grew up, and at some point we decided to focus on the service provider environments. This was something specifically conceived, built, developed, and delivered to take care of large, scalable, cloud-based, dynamic, automated environments. SolidFire was very literally born to service cloud and cloud companies. It was designed for the realistic and deep consolidation of mixed workloads. The idea of buying a storage array for a type of workload simply because the next workload that comes in wasn't going to be able to coexist on the same array is something that just frankly doesn't work at all inside a service provider in mixed workload environment. If I can't put my production in test dev, if I can't put different instances of my offering or different tenants who are consuming my offering and consolidate those onto a single storage platform, take advantage of efficiencies in operation and in cost, then I'm really doing the business a disservice. So being designed from the ground up for that consolidation was important. the consolidation is great, the scale is great, but if you can't operate it more efficiently, none of that matters. Being built as an API-only product, being built from the ground up, knowing that having infrastructure that was composable by code was the only way that we ever wanted to operate the system, ends up making that a compelling argument for customers. And then finally, wrapping all of these together, integrating in with platforms, and really trying to not just be a part of, but define and enable what a next generation data center looks like is the final piece of that. As you can tell from the picture that's up on the screen, this is not your standard storage array. We try to, when we start talking about the product itself, we quickly want to give customers a visual that lets them know this is not a dual controller array with a bunch of shelves that sit behind it. This is a node-based architecture where every one of these nodes contains both the storage software and the disk that's being managed. If we think about it like a virtualization platform, like a VMware or like an OpenStack, what we're doing here is the same thing we've been doing for years on the CPU and RAM side. We're taking two resources, that being performance and capacity. We are overlaying them with a piece of software. We're clustering a bunch of nodes together in order to create large, dynamic, provisionable pools of those resources that we can provide out. When we did that, there were 5 things that we wanted to do as well as we possibly could. We wanted to be granular. We wanted to be predictable. We wanted to provide deep automation integration. We wanted the array to be self-healing. We didn't want manual intervention to be the way we rectify hardware faults or software faults in the array. And then finally, we wanted the data services, the data efficiencies to be something that weren't optional, that they were global, that they were always on. We're going to focus on a couple of these, particularly the granular, predictable, and integration, because those are the ones that we see directly affecting the viability of software as a service platforms the most. The scale outside of things, the node-based architecture makes this easy, but we had a couple wrinkles that we wanted to throw in there, particularly for software as a service providers and hosting providers who don't always know exactly how they're going to be able to grow. They don't know the mix of performance to capacity that they need. They don't know how fast or slow they're going to need to go, and they don't always know what the storage requirements are going to be for the next workload, for the next application that gets deployed onto it. Being able to provide both linear and nonlinear scale, being able to mix nodes of different sizes, being able to change on the fly the ratio of capacity to I/O inside a cluster was something that ends up being massively important to customers like service providers and software as a service providers who are very much trying to match the consumption of the applications that are being deployed. The more closely we can do that, the more margin we can drive out of the business and the less risk we introduce there. Being able to expand or contract without disruption or reconfiguration is, this is jacks are better to play. We can't have customers telling their tenants that we're going to impact their performance because we're adding more capacity or having to forklift or move workloads from one storage array to another. So being able to expand and contract as we move performance and capacity around within the environment was key. Also being able to load balance across those nodes. There's not a whole lot of point in having lots of nodes in a cluster if you're not leveraging those nodes individually to be able to service the applications that are running the best you can. With a SolidFire platform, we're dynamically load balancing all of the workloads, both from a capacity and performance standpoint, across all of the nodes in the cluster, taking into account the fact that some nodes may have more performance and some nodes may have more capacity than others. And then finally, future-proofing that. One of the big challenges that revenue-generating companies have with traditional storage is that I have to buy a whole bunch up front, and in 3 years, the chances of me being able to upgrade that to something that is much more modern or being able to take advantage of new technology is pretty low. And so we put a guarantee in place that says every version of the Element OS software that we release is going to be usable and is going to be supported on every version of SolidFire hardware that we still have under contract. So there's no risk that we'll release a new version of software and then look at our customers and say, you can't have any of the benefits of this unless you upgrade the hardware as well. And customers get to decide when they do upgrades. Customers get to decide when a new platform comes out, if it matches better their utilization, if it's denser, if there's more more capacity for the same amount of rack space. That's not something that we have to drive. That's a behavior that customers get to dictate for themselves. And I guess the last thing that I'd add here is that flash is probably the fastest moving part of the storage ecosystem, and having to wait 3 years to take advantage of new technology there seems kind of ridiculous. So being able to tell customers every time we release a new node, bigger drives, faster drives, different drive technologies, you can take advantage of those dynamically by plugging them into a cluster that you already have, seems to be a much more efficient way of allowing software as a service companies to take advantage of new advancements, both from a cost and performance standpoint, rather than forcing them to wait and knowing that the end of life of that product is going to offer diminished capabilities compared to what's available in the market. Once we created this big pool of storage, the next thing that we had to do was we had to be able to protect the workloads from each other. One of the big limitations of a dual controller architecture is that it's really hard to guarantee that any individual application that's running on those controllers is going to get a specific amount of performance no matter what. What SolidFire did was introduce guaranteed quality of service, which not only includes rate limiting, or being able to tell a workload that it's not allowed to have more than X amount of performance, right? Being able to effectively protect the storage array from the individual workloads, but also includes a minimum where no matter what's happening on the storage array, no matter how many volumes are misbehaving, no matter how many applications are exceeding where it is that they were supposed to be, we will always promise a minimum amount of IOPS to every volume that's there. And we'll go so far as to back volumes off of their maximum however fast we need to in order to be able to guarantee that. This idea of being able to protect the workloads from each other is what allows SolidFire to be such a good fit for environments where we have different types of development environments, where we have different types of applications, or where we have different customer service levels that are being expected, and still being able to protect all of those individually. Being able to dynamically allocate, manage, and guarantee storage performance is interesting and is useful. The real part here is that we've never in the storage industry had the ability to actually provision performance. We could always provision capacity, and with that capacity came a certain amount of performance, but being able to allocate a specific large or small amount of performance out of the pool that is the cluster specifically to a workload and then enforce that is something that is unique to SolidFire and something that's unique to the storage industry. If we've created the pool, we've created the QoS, it's interesting to look at operationally as we start to wrestle with some of the things that impact software as a service providers and see how these two things put together really start to make an impact. What we've got here is an example of two different workloads, two very different I/O profile workloads that are running on the same storage array. On the left, we have a database, and that database was given a minimum of 100 IOPS. And on the right, this is a VDI boot storm. So these could be a test dev environment and a production environment where some of my unit tests got a little out of control. There's lots of different candidates that we could put in these two sides. But essentially what we've got is one workload that's I/O bound that is starving the second workload for performance. And in a traditional storage environment, there's an entire triage process that your operations teams go through at this point. They're trying to figure out what are the affected applications, what are the affected customers, what storage array is that on, what other options do I have for performance tiers within that storage array or on other storage arrays that are on the floor, how do I move that data, how long is that going to take, what sort of impact is that going to have to the customer. All of this ends up being a drag both on my ability to produce and deliver applications, but also the customer satisfaction for the applications that are already out there. In a SolidFire environment, being able to triage this process is far simpler because I simply go to my first application, I go to that database or to that tenant that was being starved out, and I change that minimum IOPS to something that more closely matches the service level that I promised them. And when I do that, immediately the storage array will rebalance everything across the nodes and will provide the specified IOPS to that platform or to that application, completely removing the contention and completely isolating the two workloads from one another. I get the ability to dynamically and in real time reallocate performance that I have sitting and existing on the array from one application to another or from the available provision pool to any specific application that needs it. Operationally, I think that this is the biggest differentiator that the SolidFire architecture and product brings, is that remediating things that would be operational issues becomes much easier, becomes much more straightforward, and is something that we can do from a much more automated standpoint. And when we talk about the automation, we early on realized that we didn't want to build a storage platform that was dependent on a command line interface. We didn't want to build a storage platform that was dependent on another standalone Java-based UI. We wanted to build a platform that had at its core only a single management tenant, and that was a full-featured, fully regression protected, fully versioned API. And so the API that sits at the core of SolidFire is the only first-class management path that we have. Everything else that we do, everything that we do from an SDK standpoint, everything we do from a platform standpoint, all we're doing is translating back into the core APIs. When software as a service and service provider companies really want to start differentiating their offering or really start digging into the operational side of things and how they can streamline it, the API becomes their best friend. We have service providers that have never seen the UI of the individual SolidFire nodes because that's not where they live. They live in an environment where plugging a SolidFire node in and then running a series of API commands against it in order to join it into an existing cluster is much easier for them to manage, is much more streamlined and much faster for them to be able to get that capital that they spent on inventory into a place where they can provision it. Before we jump into the integrations here, let's take a break now that we've looked at kind of those three core parts of the SolidFire platform and see if there are any questions. One of the questions in here is, what type of integrations do you see software as a service customers using? It's a little bit all over the place. It's a good question. When we look at the 4 case studies that we had in there, they're a little bit all over the board. So Ultimate Software, for example, is 100% VMware shop. We've got a couple of those that are OpenStack environments, and I think that across the board, every one of our software as a service and infrastructure as a service customers is looking to find where the container ecosystem can benefit them. So most of those customers have a primary platform. I would say, well, all of those customers have a primary platform. Most of them are looking at multiple platforms. And I would say that all of them at this point, if they haven't already invested in a full OpenStack deployment, are trying to figure out where the container ecosystem is going to play for them. All right, so let's look at the integrations themselves. The automation that we put in and the API that's underneath there is really designed to drive the upstream integrations and to make those as easy as possible. So when we talk about the API, that's not just the self-service portals, that's not just the integration with the VMwares and OpenStacks and CloudStacks, but that's the ability to allow customers to use SDKs to plug right directly into the workflows that they already have. Especially for service provider and software as a service providers, these workflows, how we manage tenants, how we charge for tenants, how we handle billing and chargeback, all of those things tend to be very customized and proprietary systems. And being able to tell customers, I don't care whether you want to use Python or Go or Java or .NET or PowerShell or anything that you want to use, or just handle the API directly, we're going to give you the functionality that you need to be able to plug the storage in as an organic part of that process. That idea of completely and organically programmatic storage is something that we'll keep coming back to over and over for all of the SolidFire customer base, but specifically for the service providers and the folks who are looking to drive as much operational efficiency in there as they possibly can. When we look at how this manifests itself in the platform, both VMware and OpenStack have different strengths. Obviously, different software as a service companies will use the ones that make the most sense for them from a business standpoint. From VMware, as with OpenStack, as with containers, our goal is to allow the complete management of the storage solution natively from the platform that's being used to provide the raw inventory out to the tenants. So in the case of VMware, we do this through a combination of VMware virtual volumes, being able to deploy individual storage volumes for every virtualized instance that gets created, being able to do that completely from the point of view of a vCenter operator, doing all of that through the plugin, being able to natively integrate QoS, because every time we deliver a virtual volume, we have the ability to provide a service level with it, and then being able to make that fully integrated, being able to build the best vVols implementation on the planet, being as reliable and performant with both the VAI offloads as well as the VASA providers is really where we focus that operational value on the VMware platform. We get lots and lots of customers, especially customers that are either early in their process or that are coming out of an enterprise environment, who look at the VMware platform as the place that they want to consume SolidFire storage. You'll notice a couple of these. Ultimate Software is one of the referenced software as a service customers, is also a huge user of our VMware integrations. So the customer successes here are really what drive and compel us to continue providing the best environment that we can for VMware. On the OpenStack side, even more so than VMware, I feel like SolidFire is a native part of the solution. The Cinder driver that is used to create that API link, that programmatic link between the OpenStack consumer and the storage array on the back end, is a project that SolidFire spearheaded. It's a product that we have an employee who was the head of that project for the first 3 or 4 years of its existence. Cinder is something that is near to our hearts and something that we pour an awful lot of work and attention into maintaining. And the reason for that is because it's the way we turn SolidFire into invisible storage behind OpenStack. The ability to set and maintain QoS levels on a per instance basis, the ability to create everything you would need to from a storage standpoint, whether those are snapshots, clones, being able to manage the SolidFire volumes and the QoS levels on them directly, being able to configure that easily. It's a total of 5 lines of code in the cinder.conf file to be able to attach a SolidFire array on the back end, and then really be able to eliminate all of the management layers between OpenStack and the storage system. If an OpenStack administrator or someone who's using Horizon to provision OpenStack instances ever has to pick up the phone or send an email to a storage team in order to get done what they need to get done, we've completely failed as a point of integration. So that's really where we're driving the ability to eliminate that, but then also do that as a fully integrated part of OpenStack. There are no external drivers. There's no registering and downloading something and loading it into every OpenStack instance that you've deployed. All of the SolidFire Cinder code is upstream and is available in any distribution of OpenStack the customers want to use. And because of that, our interoperability with the OpenStack environment is pretty significant. Whether those are individual distributions, whether those are customers large and small, and again, we see a couple of the software as a service reference customers in here. OpenStack has been a place that SolidFire has excelled. When it comes to block Cinder or block storage in OpenStack, much the same way when it comes to block storage in service providers, SolidFire is the de facto standard there. Part of the value for this is that there's no simpler licensing process for storage in the industry. Everything that we do, every feature that we provide, every integration that we offer, every feature that's on the array gets licensed inclusively every time a new node is added. So whether that's security features, whether that's multi-tenancy features, whether that's protocol features, 5 different types of replication that can be done on a volume-by-volume basis, all of the cloud-based monitoring, alerting, trending analysis that needs to happen on the array, and then, of course, all of the integrations, all of the VMware integrations, OpenStack, CloudStack, containers, all of those being native parts of what we offer and all of those being included with every customer makes that easy. And we see the results of this. Right, we see the results of this in the software as a service environments, in the service provider customers that SolidFire has. Our job is to be the robot at the bottom, right? Our job is to build the foundation for everything that our customers want to build on top of that, to do it quickly, to do it simply, to do it cleanly, and to not ever get in the way of the products or services that our customers are looking to deliver out. The more we can facilitate that, the easier we can make it, the better. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We'll take one last look through the questions here and see if we have anything for you. And it looks like the last one that we had in here is what's the benefit of SolidFire over a public cloud like Amazon Web Services? I think the better question is what platform ends up making the most sense for my business and my customers. In many cases, there's no problems whatsoever with software as a service customers going directly to a cloud provider, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Google, and building what it is that they need. The challenge comes after that application works, right? The challenge comes at what cost do we scale, at what cost does that OpEx portion of my cloud consumption end up matching with the revenue that I'm driving? Do I have compliance issues? Do I have security issues? Do I have existing facilities that I have the ability to leverage and aren't? You know, do I have data centers that have been built? Do I have an infrastructure that I could leverage that would allow me to drive better margins out of that product? So I don't look at it necessarily as a which is better. I look at it as there are use cases for having a integrated, programmatic, invisible cloud infrastructure platform in your own facilities, and there are times that it makes sense to have that platform in a cloud environment or somewhere that you can pay for it by the drink. We want to make it a business decision for our customers, not a compromise on the technical outcomes and on the things that they're capable of doing with the platform. So it's not an either or. In most cases, it's an and. We've got customers that are doing both, but really it comes down to what are we trying to deliver for customers, what does that outcome look like, and how quickly do we want to be able to iterate and provide those services out. All right, one last check. I don't see any other questions in there. Thank you all for taking the time. This is a place where I think you're going to see a lot more collateral. You're going to see a lot more content from the SolidFire team specifically for all of our software as a service friends out there. If you have any questions, if there's anything that we can do to follow up, you'll probably pretty immediately get an email from ReadyTalk that that kind of wraps up what we did and gives you the summary of what's going on. Please feel free to reach out and ask. There's so much of this that we know is unique from software as a service provider to software as a service provider. Digging in and finding out what those requirements are and digging in and finding out where SolidFire can help and whether SolidFire can help is part of the fun of this. So thank you for attending. Appreciate the time and hope you enjoy the rest of the day.